I'll be letting people in as we go. So, welcome everybody. We are so excited to have you with us today. We are recording the session. You might have gotten that little notification. Um, and to save bandwidth for all of our attendees, we ask that you turn off your cameras during the presentation and mute yourselves. I'll be monitoring the chat so you can share your questions there. And then I'll share with the presenters. Um, Alice will be sharing the recording in a follow-up email. If you're uncomfortable with your name showing in the recording, you can change your name to anonymous and then private message me with your name, and I can add that to our attendance. And if your Zoom name doesn't match the name you registered with, please let me know as well. And for our land acknowledgement, TCINN is headquartered in Austin, and as such, I am on the ancestral and unceded land of the Tonkawa, Comanche, and Sauna people. Our ongoing colonial presence on indigenous lands compels us to take action now to counteract the effects of colonization. The work we do through TCINN is one small step towards that effort. And I'll drop some information in the chat. And I would like to welcome our speakers, Lisa Gianukos and Adriana Castro of the Children's Environmental Literacy Foundation. I'm so sorry if I butchered your last name, Lisa.
No, you didn't. It was perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Jenny. Good morning, all. Just to respect the request of everyone keeping their cameras off and their mute, it's hard for us. We're teachers, so we love that engagement piece, but we acknowledge that and we're grateful for that. So thank you for taking your Saturday morning off and coming and connecting with us to learn a little bit more about civic science and project-based learning. So as Jenny shared, we are with the Children's Environmental Literacy Foundation. We go by CELF as a shorter reference, CELF. And our mission is to provide sustainability as an integral part of every child's K-12 learning experience. And what that means is we work specifically with teachers and students in an environmental education capacity so that we can provide them with resources and opportunities that allow them to holistically integrate sustainability into pre-existing curricula. So a lot of what we do is additional resources, and it's not focused on an actual set curriculum. And just to acknowledge our team. We are a nationwide organization, and we have presence in the East Coast, in the West Coast, and here in Texas. And Adriana and I, we lead the charge on all things CELF in the state of Texas. So it's a large state for the two of us, but we're so glad that we get to be able to have this opportunity to connect beyond our reach. So as mentioned earlier, we provide resources and supports for teachers and students to integrate sustainability into their classroom experience. And this can take many different forms. Traditionally, we have held a flagship event called the Summer Institute. And that's where we get to work directly with teachers throughout the summer when they're no longer the teacher of record. They don't have to think about the specific IEPs or accommodations or supports that students need at that time, but instead they can walk into our workshops and think holistically just about being a teacher and pedagogy and what those project components can look like throughout the academic year. But we also understand the realities of the new school year, and so that the template of a project that the teachers come up with during the Summer Institute morphs as the new school year begins. And that's where Adriana and I walk alongside these teachers and try to keep up with what's going on in their classroom, but also the change of those projects. And so we offer up Green Career guest speakers. We also offer up field experiences, and we try to find many different meaningful opportunities for our students and our teachers to engage in environmental education. Today's session is about civic science, and that is one of our programs. And at the conclusion of this session, everyone here will be caught up to our national cohort. We just started a national cohort this week. So if you're interested in going beyond today's session with us in following civic science throughout the academic year, we would love to have you join us. We have virtual connections, and we can do student exchanges where students are teaching other students and learning from other students across the nation. And we also provide supports in attaining different types of awards and distinctions. This is specific to the Federal Green Ribbon Award. We've helped and supported a number of schools in attaining that. And that's just basically, it's a symbol that a campus has collaboratively worked together to address sustainable practices and systems along their campus, and they've had whole school change as a result of it. So in the past 20 years, our small but mighty team has done a lot of work. Since 2003, we've been able to work with 1.5 million students. We've trained 15,000 teachers, and we've had presence in 5,000 schools. And that may not be much to some people, but for us, we are a small team, and we find that like the metrics there to be something to be proud of. So we're very proud of our reach and also our engagement with teachers. And as you can see from our interactive map, just where our different programmings have taken place. So we're really focused on equipping teachers and students in that systems thinking approach. And again, we don't ask that you consider a curriculum. We just ask for you to consider us as a resource, and so that we can support something that you are currently doing or something that you want to do. We bring community stakeholders, as mentioned earlier, Green Career guest speakers. We also provide funding opportunities for teachers, specifically on project development and implementation. So the Civic Science cohort that we began on Thursday, and now everyone here on this call will be a part of that as well, has ranged from many different cities across the nation. And this is a wonderful visual of how your students, or where your students can connect with, because we're going to be doing student exchanges with students in all of these different areas throughout the next academic year. And we would love to invite everyone here to be a part of that, because when students are teaching students, it's a real powerful, authentic learning moment for all. So just a quick overview of what we're going to go over today. We just discussed a little bit more about our program. We're going to differentiate between civic and citizen science, because I think that delineation is important. We're going to start off with our inquiry to action framework and talk about what that looks like. We're also going to talk about what youth voices in action how that can take shape and what that can look like. And then we're going to give you guys some opportunities to consider mapping and inquiry steps, and then we'll talk to you about next steps if you are interested in joining our national cohort. So this is what we shared the other day on Thursday with our US cohort, and this is still applicable and relevant to everyone here if you want to continue with us beyond today's session. So today's session is technically session 1. We're going to re-engage on November 9th. We're going to talk a little bit more about data analysis, data collection and analysis. And then we're going to have a collaboration and design call on January 18th. And then we're going to do an engagement on February 8th. But regardless of all these dates that we just presented, we would love to provide one-on-one supports. And if it's within our means and reach, we could also do potential site visits. And then we can help facilitate and coordinate those student exchanges. So we really are in the business of just trying to support teachers and whatever they need to ensure that projects that are being implemented are meaningful, but also well supported as well. A lot of times teachers are armies of one, and it gets exhausting, and that's very quickly how burnout takes place. So we would love to be your support system in implementing different civic science projects. So if you do proceed with us beyond today, the total time of working and engaging with us this academic year in the Civic Science program is about 10 hours. And if you are interested in continuing on, we have micro grants after today, and filling out an interest form or a registration form, you will qualify for micro grants. We're very proud of our growth in this area as an organization. We've been able to provide stipends and micro grants for teachers to either go on field trips or to get resources for projects, or even to cover for substitute costs. Some campuses have different budgetary needs, and so you can use those micro grants to either complement what's going on the campus or use it directly in your classroom. It's very contingent on the needs and the DNA of your campus. And if you're able to, some teachers have used the microgrants to ensure attendance to our student symposium, which will be taking place March 6th, which is a Wednesday on 2024. And that is another way that you can apply those microgrants, is getting your students to Houston, Texas. This past spring, we had a class from the Rio Grande Valley who traveled up 6 hours to us, spent the night in a hotel, and used some of those funds to mitigate those costs. And they were able to present their findings at our student symposium. And it was a real powerful opportunity to virtually work with these kiddos, but then to have them in each other's company and presenting and bringing in field experts to further refine and improve the projects that they're working on. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Adriana.
Thanks, Lisa. Before we delve into more specifically what civic science is, I want to talk about the difference between citizen science and civic science. So citizen science is a term that you might have heard before, and it usually refers to the public volunteering to help conduct scientific research. And this can be designing experiments, collecting data, analyzing results, and solving real-world problems. The data that's collected usually contributes to like a larger study, and this can be an example of data collection can be counting bird populations, tagging horseshoe crabs, and studying monarch butterflies. Then that data is also collected with tools that's often provided by a program director that's usually from either an academic institution or like a bigger organization. Now, civic science, on the other hand, this is what we specialize in. This is a student-driven approach that specifically leads to policy change and action. It's usually focused on a local community or environmental issue of concern. It's very place-based. We really emphasize that. And science is embedded within the community. The data that students would collect can take on different forms. It can be the students conducting interviews, collecting surveys, conducting observations, using monitoring devices to collect different types of data and stuff like that. It's focused on the hands-on learning experience. So we're focused on the process over the product. And the term civic science is also more inclusive than citizen science because it welcomes undocumented learners. We actually used to call our program citizen science a few years ago, but then we changed it to civic science because we saw the effect that the word citizen was having on these different populations. So we wanted them to feel welcome and like they could participate in this program. They can be scientists, they can enact action, regardless of where they come from or what backgrounds they have. So now we're going to delve into more of our civic science framework. I'm just going to briefly go over, this is a guide on the steps to our civic science program. And if you want to check out the framework specifically, if you scan that QR code, it'll take you straight to the PDF that has our framework on it. So the first step that we start with is the inquiry process. And this involves the students or the teachers, or maybe collectively the students and the teachers, coming up with a question that focuses on a problem within their community. It can be environmental or it can be an infrastructure problem. They can focus on air quality, water quality. Basically, they choose what they want to focus on. Then they want to collect data to answer that question that they have. And the data, like I said before, it can be collected using interviews, documents. They can use photos. They can use different types of tools and technologies and apps to collect their data. Then once they have their data, they want to lay it out and they want to look at it, analyze it to see if they can spot any trends or patterns that will help them answer questions. Then that fourth step, we encourage the students to collaborate either with themselves as peers, with their teachers, their educators, or they can bring in experts and collaborate with them to kind of figure out the next steps in their project. Then the fifth step is that design process. We encourage the students to design a solution to the problem that they posed with the inquiry question. And then that last step is that action piece. This is really kind of the goal of the whole civic science program. We want to empower the students to share their findings with an audience of decision makers and field experts so that they can really enact change within their community. So looking at the civic science approach, we just want to kind of get a temperature check and ask you guys what resonates with you about this approach, and maybe how does this framework apply to your current practices? Feel free to chat, put something in the chat, or maybe just speak your mind.
I think it really fits with the new standards that teachers are going to have to use. And so I think that's very helpful for teachers. It gives them a framework for getting that started and under control.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Anyone else want to chime in? You can also use the chat if you're very shy of speaking.
So, hello. I would just say that I think the framework is really great, and I use the basic outline of it in a curriculum that I wrote for my doctoral project that is geared toward middle and high school students, where they use their school grounds kind of as their laboratory and build a case essentially for a more ecological but also culturally relevant school grounds. And so they're doing the all the steps in that you just mentioned, and at the end result is that hopefully they're designing their ideal school grounds, and based on research and interviews, discussions, group work that they've already done, and they make their case through a presentation to their school board or whoever, community leaders, however that works with their particular school, and try to, get at least a start of their plan implemented. So I think it's a really powerful framework, and I think the students learn a lot of skills that they can apply to other things in their life, and they kind of figure out things that are important to them and things that they may want to take action on, outside of the specific project that you may be working on with them. So I think it's great.
Thank you for that. We just want to acknowledge in the chat, Brianna said she enjoys the framework because it's showing students that they can make a difference in their community. Oh, we got another person. Pam Cooley says, I would love to use this, but I only see my science students once a day, 1 day a week, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, then not again for 6 weeks. So if I could incorporate the homeroom teacher to have more time. This is a good point, and we don't only prescribe the civic science framework to science teachers. We also encourage other disciplines to use it. Lisa and I are former teachers. We did not teach science. I taught social studies. She taught English, but we can easily see how this can be applied to other curriculums. All right, I'm going to switch it back over to Lisa.
Thank you, Adriana. And so thank you for those comments and that engagement. Just as Adriana said, we are teachers at heart. So it is a meaningful time for us when we can engage with everyone and hear your voice. And to the point that Adriana made, sustainability is interdisciplinary, and a lot of times it has been housed in the sciences, just because it seems to the public that it's just an easy fit. Yet for us, when we're talking about sustainability and civic science, we think that this goes beyond just one content. And so allowing for there to be collaboration between the different contents is one of the ways that we encourage civic science to be used. But what does that framework look like? And we're going to show a video. It's just a couple moments long. And actually, this was a video that was created separate from our nonprofit. And later on, we did eventually collaborate with Young Voices for the Planet. Now we have a strong collaboration with them. And we have worked with this young lady, Jason here, but this right here is just an example of what students can do if they are given a framework to work with and for them to understand how to develop their own path. And I say that because Jason really did develop her own path in this. She was given some supports and structures, but she worked towards this. And then later on, we were able to collaborate. So we are just going to take a moment. I am going to, can you see my screen?
Say hi, Jasa. Jasa, say hi.
Can you guys hear or see my screen?
Hi.
Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear and see the screen? All right.
When I was 6, I had a horrible asthma attack to the point where I actually had to exert myself breathing because I had so much trouble pulling air into my lungs.
My sister-in-law was a nurse and she got her stethoscope and checked Jasa, threw her in my arms and told me to rush her to the emergency room right now.
A lot of kids in my school have trouble breathing and have to be hospitalized. I know it was really hard for some kids in gym. There was like an entire cabinet filled with asthma medicine. This is the coal-fired power plant.
The coal plant spews a lot of toxins, so I knew that that had something to do with why my daughter had an asthma attack.
My neighborhood isn't very rich. I don't know why there are so many plants in Bridgeport. There's the garbage plant, the sewage plant, the landfill, and the coal-fired power plant. I started searching up power plants, and when I saw how it actually affects people, I thought, that's horrible. I actually have to do something about this. PSEG is the company that runs the power plant in my neighborhood.
PSEG knew what was in their smokestacks.
I really wish I could get into other people's head, like people in the PSEG, what are they thinking putting polluting power plants in our backyard? I think it may be a case of environmental racism. Up in Westport, they have like mowed lawns, like picture perfect. And this is the most important thing, no power plants. No rich white neighborhood would ever allow some power plant to just be built in their backyard. So what companies do is pick a neighborhood that's poor, and usually these neighborhoods are colored neighborhoods. Some people have had a really big impact on my life. Harriet Tubman proved that if you put your mind to it, you will be able to free yourself from oppression. Martin Luther King proved that not every conflict has to be solved with violence. My mom is my hero because she helps make the world a better place. She's a first sergeant in the Army Reserves. My dad, he's a musician, so he's able to inspire people and make them happy. He plays reggae music because he was born in Jamaica. This group called Healthy Connecticut Alliance asked me if I wanted to do this event speaking to the city hall because I had asthma and I've been affected by it. And I said, yeah, okay.
She's come on stage with me a few times. She came on stage and she took the microphone from me and walked away with it. She's there performing a dance. I'm like, this girl, she has no fear. I was so proud of her. I was surprised when I heard that she was writing her own speeches.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jason Mellors. I am 10 years old and I attend Bryan School.
I didn't know if anybody would listen to me.
I am here today to talk about retiring the coal plant and restricting other bad polluters from polluting Bridgeport.
Because when you're a kid, it's hard to get anybody to listen to you.
I know that Fairfield County has the worst air pollution in the state. I know that because I'm smart and I looked it up on the internet.
That led to a long road of fighting and testifying. I just say what I'm feeling, and it sounds a lot more powerful when you talk in the heart. It came out that they were going to close the power plant, and I had to hear it a couple of times. Are you sure? Is that what they said? Where is it in writing?
When I found out, I was just ecstatic because we worked so hard to get this place shut down. And it was just really satisfying to know that all of our hard work paid off and that it wouldn't be hurting anybody anymore.
Even though I didn't have money, I had words, and words have power.
All right, so I'm gonna move back over here. And just to confirm, Adriana, you can see my screen?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. And I just want to acknowledge that Adriana put this video into the chat. So if you're looking for an extension of that, and we can actually share the slide deck as well at the end of our session. We'd like to make that readily available, especially if you're interested in that and continuing that relationship with us beyond today. So as you can see, that opportunity that Jasa had, she saw the connection of environmental injustice, and she was able to work with community groups and to use her words to speak truth to power to those adult decision makers. And it eventually led to the closing of the coal-fired plant, but it also gave her a lot of empowerment as a student and to see her actions make significant change. Oh, sorry, all. That was not intentional. All right, so we do want to engage you a little bit more. We would just like to ask a couple of questions, and please feel free to either put it in the chat or to unmute yourself. But the questions that we're looking to tease out a little bit here today is just what environmental issues does Jasa investigate? And how does her story model what we see as inquiry? And how does her story connect to her place? Any takers, any participants like to comment? Or even if there are these questions or something you don't want to respond to, maybe you would like to speak to just the video that you saw.
I can chime in. This is Pam, and I was just going to say, what a powerful young woman, and I'm so proud of her. I think it's amazing what young people can do when they have that connection and they feel like they're able to make, have a voice and say something and continue to have that courage to keep at it. So of course, connecting to her place, if she didn't have, the health issues that she was seeing in her school, and for herself as well, that makes a huge impact. And I think a lot of times in other places, maybe people don't see it because the landfill is not in their backyard. But if we made it more clear that space is at a premium in our country, and so just because we think, well, it's not here, it is somewhere. And so we all need to be aware of the issues and having our kids know the truth instead of, oh, well, we just live in this quaint little town and there's no problem. The garbage man comes and picks up the trash, and it goes away. So I think it's a great thing that she was able to have that investigation and have the support and then see it through. So she's going to be a change maker for life.
Thank you. Thank you for those words and for your perspective. We appreciate that. Sandra, would you like to say something?
Sure. I think that having a teacher who supports kids is really important, and parents who support kids. Getting up in front of people and talking is something most kids do not like to do and really need that support to let them be able to do that. I think many of them have issues that they'd be happy to talk about if they knew how and how to do it. So your program is preparing them for that. So I think it's a great idea, and the framework, it is so useful to teachers who haven't done this kind of thing before, from the standpoint that it gives them some beginning place to do that. And the new, I'm from Texas, and the new to EKS here are the science standards, and they are so much like what you have your framework built around, and I think it will be a real jewel for kids.
Thank you. And thank you for recognizing that alignment, because that is something that we do try to share with teachers, is that we're not asking them to do anything outside the standards. We're actually trying to give them a framework that works within the standards. So thank you for that recognition, Sandra. And just thinking about where to start, I think is always, I don't know about for you guys, but as a teacher, sometimes the first step is the hardest, because you're trying to grapple with what this means for me as a teacher and what the preparation will require, but also how it's going to land with my students. And so just stepping forward and progressing towards fostering inquisitive minds is always that first step. And what does that look like? So when we're talking about this framework, obviously we're going to start with inquiry. We're going to start with that curiosity, and curiosity really is that driver of development. And so when we're talking about inquiry, students, we want students to connect with their place, because something that we have learned as an organization is that when students are familiar with place, they're connected to the place, they understand their place, they then love place, and they're going to protect their place. And so fostering that connection is our first step, and allowing them to understand not only the nuances, but the benefits, but also the problems of their place, so they can see that from their perspective and address it. So the way in which we do that is mapping. It's as basic, it's just simple as that. We ask the teachers, before you actually do this with your students, for you to map your place. And place could be the campus, it could be the community, it could be the city. It's really contingent on the needs and basically the skill set of your class. So sometimes mapping a city is just too broad. So if you want to start a little bit smaller and then eventually scale, you can go as small as your classroom. You can go as small as just a specific learning area. And then when the teachers and you as the teacher map place, it's great to show that and model that for your students, because eventually when students start mapping their place, you might find that the student map is not necessarily congruent with the teacher map. And that's okay, because teachers have a tower view. We see things from a different perspective, and the students really do have the street view. They see it from a different angle because they're living it from a different height than we are. And so just mapping allows there to be a calibration moment between teachers and students to see the similarities, but also for the students to see things that maybe the teacher identified, and for the teachers to see things that the students identified. So when we're talking about that mapping, I'm going to kick it off to my colleague, Adriana, our social studies guru.
Thanks, Lisa. So when we tell teachers to map out their school, we really encourage them to kind of go on a walking tour of the campus if they want to do the campus with their students. And it's also a way to get physical activity into the classroom as well. But the students can make direct observations. They can see where specific things are. And when you're mapping, you want to include the following things and maybe a little bit more things. You want to include any labels. You want to include any landmarks. Maybe there's like specific statues, there's specific waterways, any nearby cross streets, and maybe you want to also include if there's any sidewalks on those cross streets or not. We actually had a teacher do a project on sidewalks before. If there's any green space on the campus, you could also include that. And maybe there's a lack of green space, and that's something that the students might want to focus on as well. And then we also want the kids to also include the traditional things that a map has, like a legend to kind of explain the labels, and then a compass. We really encourage them to know their north, south, east, and west, and then other unique features that you might have noticed around campus. So when we're doing the mapping, mapping is just another form of storytelling. And the whole civic science program is also another form of storytelling. So your map, it really just tells a story of like your community or your campus. It allows you to identify any community assets. So if you have access to any waterways, if you have a green space or don't have green space, if you have any playgrounds, if there's any waste collection points, you can also include that in your map. It could also help you identify areas for improvement. If there's a playground, but it doesn't have a shade structure, and if you live in Houston, Texas, you know that that shade is important, especially in the hotter months. That could be an area that the kids would want to focus on for improvement. You want to focus on what elements of the school and community are most important to your story. If the kids are really interested in air quality, maybe that's something that you would want to focus on. And then if you want to take it a step further, maybe if you want to focus on this with the older kids, maybe you could go back and focus on who are the indigenous people of the land that you inhabit, what were their land practices, and maybe how are we using the space differently from how it was used in the past? What's the history of the community? Maybe the community was inhabited by different people 50 years ago, and now it's inhabited by a totally new population. You could also focus on that. And then how does the history continue to shape the community today? So we're just going to go through a few examples of maps. This is a map of the general area around UH Clear Lake. We did a summer institute there, so that's a map that I drew, and it just focused on the really prominent landmarks like Ellington Airfield, NASA Johnson Space Center, the Clear Lake, and then the highways, and then the exit points to Galveston Bay, because I wanted the students to focus on how the land was being used. We were using it for like military purposes, for aeronautical purposes, and then we had a lot of access to different waterways. And then if you want to take it a step further in your maps, you can also layer different data onto the map. This is from upstate New York, and they were really focusing on the water, the MUD districts, right, Lisa? Yeah, in there. So you could also make it a little bit more complicated and focus on that. If you want to layer in technology, different types of technologies, you could also use Google Maps is a great resource when you're mapping, and you could take screenshots of different things and then layer on different data onto your map. ThingLink is a really good resource to use for that as well. And then if the next slide, it shows a time lapse of Google Earth. So Google Earth has a time lapse feature where you can focus on different areas and see how they've changed over time. This one focuses on Canada, might not be that relevant to us. The next slide focuses on an area in California. And this area, you can really see all of the commercial development that has been going on there over the years. And then you can also see kind of the diminishing of green space within the area. So that could also be something that you could have your students focus on as well. And then just wanted to mention one more thing. This is an environmental justice screening and mapping tool. And this could also focus on different data points, like it could layer in flood maps, it could layer in air quality data. And that could be something that your kids would want to focus on. This is specifically from Channel View because we did have a few teachers focus on air quality around Channel View. The area is near the ship channel and the port of Houston. So there's a lot of industrial activity going on there, and the kids were really interested in what that industrial activity, what effect that had on their air quality. All right, I'm going to kick it back to Lisa.
Thank you. So as we have emphasized, that mapping piece really is a grounding practice for teachers and students. Again, we encourage you to do it independently and then have your whole students do it. And then doing a comparison, because that is a real, it's a real eye opener for both students and teacher to understand how other people are viewing the land in which they're residing on. And so from that, questions start to come up, different things start to arise. As Adriana mentioned, one of the projects that we worked with a teacher had to do with sidewalks. Yet initially, when the teacher did the mapping activity, her initial idea was to do air quality because of just the land or the area in which she lives in. And so when she presented this to her students, she presented the map with an air quality perspective and an air quality layer. And when the students started doing the mapping activity, that's not what they saw. That wasn't their primary concern. Their primary concern was they were curious, why were there no sidewalks leading up to the campus? And this was relevant to them because not only did they live down the street and they were pedestrians going to school, but there were also 3 other campuses. So on this main road, there are 4 campuses, and the majority of the student population lived in apartment buildings down these streets. And a good portion of these students have to walk to school. Yet there were no sidewalks paved the way to the campus. It was when you get on to the campus premises that there would be sidewalks around or just leading up to the building. Yet there was no safety access or no safe access along the way from the apartment buildings to these educational facilities. And so when the students saw that, they told the teacher, like, we get the air quality piece, but our environmental justice piece is walking on these sidewalks and being able to have safe access to campuses and to school. And so that really shift the inquiry from what the teacher was really thinking that the foci could be to going over to what the students had. So allowing students to be curious and to really delve into that mapping piece is the way in which you can spark their fancy and generate interest in this project. But once you've established that mapping and a congruency as to what the focus is going to be, the next step is trying to provide students with a well-rounded, well-thought-of driving question that will serve as a North Star in the project development. And that's overwhelming and that's intimidating, yet I will say, as a precursor, it takes time. So today we are going to give you that formula so that you can start tinkering with it and start working on it on your own. Yet we encourage you to take your time with this, because as days progress, you're going to be thinking about this more and more through the lens of resources, accessibility, capability of your students, and all these different just details that will allow you to morph the driving question to be relevant to the needs of your students. So we ask you to think about 5 things before you put everything together. And if we were in person, which is like always the dream, we would chunk this out. We would start with the first 3. We would ask you to think about just 1, 2, and 3 and formulate it. And then we would all give each other feedback. And then we would come back and do 4 and 5. Because of time constraints and just acknowledging that we have about 15 minutes left, we don't have that luxury of time. So we want to be able to share with you everything with the hopes that you're going to take a picture of this, or you're going to use the slide deck that we have created for a later time, and you can start mulling over this, because the more you start to work on this, the more it's going to start to crystallize. So the first step is providing your students with a real world role. And the reason why this is important is because this is civic science. We want our kids to think civically. We want our students, and this is like specifically for our middle and high school students, they are 6 years or less away from graduating. That means they're 6 years or less away from being voters, employees, employers, homeowners, contributing society members. And so instead of identifying students as our students, like my 3rd grade class or my high school class, we want students to think of themselves as contributing members to the society. So for this one, we have teased out city planners, because the problem that they're going to be addressing is standing water. And we want students to think about maybe the long-term impact of what it means to plan for buildings or for cities, and just thinking about the environmental impact of that planning as well. So for this one, students will be city planners there. And this is a great opportunity to actually engage with local city planners to come in and maybe even share about their work and share about their job tasks, so that students can think a little more layered in this project development. The second part that we want you to consider and to identify is that community problem. So is it air quality? Is it water quality? Is it sidewalk accessibility? That will really stem from the mapping piece. That will really become clear, especially if you identify your map and the students identify, and you collectively identify that environmental issue. The third piece is that why. Like, why are we doing this? Why are we going to be addressing the standing water? Well, for this purpose, it's to develop a sustainable watershed proposal to mitigate that standing water. So that's why we're doing this. And it's so important that these different 5 components are identified ahead of time, because students are so good at asking questions that can tease out if a project's strong or not. And so really allowing all these 5 pieces to coalesce and to really solidify and putting it together allows your students to keep on returning back to the driving question as their guide. Now, as I appreciated the comments earlier about the new rollout of the Texas TEKS. Those are the standards that we call here. And so we do have a new set of TEKS coming out in the fall of 24. And one of the things that we have identified as differentiation, I know that some people use differentiation with different levels or different the different types of assignments that are scaled up or scaled down according to the needs of the students. We actually don't want to talk about the differentiation in terms of workload or amount. We want to talk about differentiation in terms of the audience members and the final product. And so when we're talking about audience members, we want to tier maybe 3 or 4 different audience groups that the students can present to. And according to those different groups is where you're going to organize your students. And so for our shy students, our introverts, or those students that maybe have not had a lot of time in class, maybe we have multilingual students that are still navigating a new language. We don't want to put them in front of city council. That's not a kindness to kids. Actually, it might be overwhelming to kids. And I think Sandra identified this earlier, that it's hard to speak for kids to speak to adults. So we don't want to make we don't want to put kids in anxious situations. So we want to, for those students that are a little more sensitive to new audiences, we want to differentiate the experience so that it is a familiar face, but maybe someone they're not completely close with. So it's either, it could be a different class, maybe campus administrators, maybe other teachers on the campus. So you want to really pull from the campus community for those students that are a little more sensitive to new audiences. Then you have a larger group, because I don't think that campus audience group is going to be significantly large. What we have found is some of those more on-level students, that tends to be the larger group. So for that larger group, we want to pull more from the district administrators, because regardless of the district administrator not knowing the students, they want their district student to succeed. They want to support them and they want to see them thrive. So pulling in someone that may not be from the campus, but from the district is going to be a supportive way in which to differentiate the experience for students. In that final tier, you have your aggressive high flyers. And I think Jason Miller was an example of that even though she was speaking to, she was speaking to her campus and coming up with this project idea at a campus level and a community level, she had the gumption to stand before city council and brand new adults that she probably had no connection with prior to that event. And she was able to speak truth to power to either the coal fire CEO or city council. She was able to petition and advocate for that. And sometimes we have those high flyer students that need that healthy tension of a high stakes dynamic. And so that's the way in which you can differentiate for students according to need. And in that final product piece, we are strong believers in choice menus. As Adriana mentioned, we were both in the classroom, we were both in a local ISD, and I was at a high school, we were both at a high school level, and we had over 150 some odd students at some points. And if I asked students to produce a specific project without giving any student choice or voice, not only is it going to be hard for me to get student buy-in, I'm going to get 150 some odd or 180 some odd similar projects that I'm going to have to grade. And then there's no creativity. There's no personal interpretation of what we're trying to learn. It doesn't become intrinsic. And so we really advocate for multiple forms of representation, but also multiple final products that don't look similar to each other. And that's okay. That is a-okay for that, because then that produces curiosity, but also it allows students to take healthy risks. So just as we are coming to the end of our session together, here are 3 examples of what these driving questions can look like. And we've provided an elementary, middle, and a high school level. And I just want to recognize that the high school level, that driving question is actually a driving question I used when I was in the classroom. And the final product for my high flyer kids, instead of having them play their podcasts, for city council, we actually worked with Houston Public Media, and we were able to get a handful of our high flying podcasts to be aired on Houston Public Media, so that all of Houston who were listening to the radio were able to listen, and then they were able to interview the kids afterwards. And so it really is contingent on just what's going on in your classroom, but not what the needs are, but also just what the students are feeling comfortable with in their learning journey. All right, so we want to acknowledge, it is a Saturday morning, it's 7 minutes left, and we want to be kind to your time, but we also just want to take a moment to wrap it up. Oops, apologies. So in closing, as we mentioned at the beginning of the session, this is technically session 1. We did session 1 earlier this week with a nationwide group of teachers. And so if you want to continue on to the next session with us, our next session is November 9th. We're going to be doing data collection and analysis. Attending this session will allow you to apply for our microgrants. And our goal is to help support you, hold your hand, and to carry you through all the way up into the student symposium. And so, as mentioned, our student symposium will be in March for the greater Houston area. If you're in Texas, we invite you to come one, come all. If you're not in Texas, then please consider joining our virtual student symposium that will take place in May. So if you are interested, please use this QR code to sign up. We would love to have more teachers from this network join us. And for next steps, you can come and bring your driving question and we can talk about that so that we can see how we can connect you with other teachers nationally, but we can also work with you in the development and implementation of that project. So if you have any questions, you can ask them in the chat, but we do encourage you at this time to use this QR code and sign up. I know this is a little retroactive, or like we're doing this retroactively, but we would really like for you guys to join us on November 9th for session 2. And you can connect with teachers from California, Pennsylvania, Louisiana, New York, New Jersey. It's a wonderful opportunity to work with like-minded professionals in this capacity. And if you do not want to continue on with us, that is okay, because everyone has different levels of capacity. Yet, if you are looking for an opportunity for your students to work on a civic science project, you can encourage them to submit to National Geographic's Slingshot Challenge, a 1-minute video regarding their project and the way in which they are addressing climate and environmental issues. And the winner of this 1-minute video gets $10,000. I had to like double check that the other day because I could not believe that 1-minute video could qualify for $10,000, but it's true. And so we encourage you, if you're not able to work with us, then please consider something of this nature. It's inspiring and it's a great way for students to be engaged, and it's lucrative for them. So in concluding, we would just like to offer up our email addresses. We'd love to work with you. If you would like to schedule or request a one-on-one session to talk about this a little bit more, maybe specific questions, we'd love to offer up that opportunity. And then at this time, I will stop sharing and see if there are any questions in the chat. I know that we are coming up to time, but we wanted to give everyone the opportunity to ask anything that any burning questions that they may need clarity in.
Could you put the emails in the chat for us? That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. We will do that now. All right, if there are no other questions, and I think I see Adriana putting in our contact information into the chat. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please feel free to email us. We are here to support teachers in the progression of civic science. And thank you so much for your time. And thank you, TCINN, for this wonderful opportunity.
Thank you so much for that informative presentation. We will be sending a follow-up email with a recording of today's session. And we will also be sharing Lisa and Adriana's information there too. Thank you all for joining, and I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was awesome.
Thank you, Pam.